toxic masculinity.
So this is a woman judge talking about Donald Trump's case, I think, for election fraud or whatever. I don't know exactly what this case is. Somebody just sent me this. So I don't actually know the specifics about this, but I'd like to play it. And the reason I'd like to play it is because I want to show everybody what how bad things are right now. This is how bad things are. This is a judge talking about the election and potential election fraud. All right, one moment, please. Let's switch.
To the statement that you made prior to Justice Bradley's question. You said that there was fraud in this election. I cannot believe that you are going to come forward and you are going to accuse our fellow Wisconsinites from engaging in fraud in this election. The people of Wisconsin should be thanked for exercising their civic duty, for doing what is asked of them and coming to vote. We should be thanking them. We should be thanking the election workers and the canvassers and the local officials who soldiers on through this historic election during a global pandemic. In this state, we accept the will of the voters, and they spoke. And for you to come forward today and start just throwing out allegations of fraud with zero evidence whatsoever. What is America? It is not self-government. I'm sorry, it is self-governance. It is not governance from a king. And what you want is you want us to overturn this election so that your king can stay in power. And that is so un-American. And for you to say that anyone in Wisconsin engaged in fraud, for you to perpetuate that fallacy on the people of Wisconsin and the people of the United States in America in what has been called the most significant election in our lifetime is nothing short of shameful.
Okay, that was my fault. That's embarrassing. All right, but I figured it out. All right, we're good. I like the red flags you guys put up there. So, this is not shameful. All right, this is not shameful. There is nothing shameful about expressing a belief, expressing an idea that there is, in fact, some kind of voter fraud. All right? What are you laughing?
People saying, come on, man.
Don't you mock me. I'm Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, you're not the Biden.
Yeah, feel free to mock me. It's perfectly fine. I messed up. All right, so this judge is saying that it's shameful to claim that there's election fraud. Why is that shameful?
What Democrats were doing last 4 years.
Yeah, since Trump was elected, we've heard tons of claims of election fraud, and that's their right. We can roll our eyes, we can dismiss it, we can say that's silly, that's ridiculous, but nobody said, "Oh, you're trying to overturn our democracy. You're an evil person." We just kind of rolled our eyes and said Hillary Clinton's just a sore loser. When it comes to the Trump situation, where a lot of conservatives believe there was voter fraud, leftists are acting like we're doing something terrible by claiming there's voter fraud. Look, in a free country, the single most important thing that you must be able to say is that you believe there was election fraud, that you believe the election was stolen, right? Because how are you going to preserve your system of government if you're not allowed to criticize it? And this is the problem that we have here. This judge, I don't necessarily believe that she is a completely evil person, but I believe that she has been convinced through the media, through the other politicians, that any kind of accusation of voter fraud is somehow, an attempt to steal democracy, an attempt to steal the election. And it's just not true. It's just not true, okay? There are legitimate concerns about the election. There are legitimate red flags. There's a complete lack of transparency. All right, that alone is incredibly disconcerting. You need transparency in a democracy for people to be reassured that the election was fair. There's no transparency here. And the more transparency we demand, the more they try to cover things up and say, oh, you're not allowed to look here, you're not allowed to look there. So, yeah, of course there's a lot of people out there who are never going to believe that this election was fair. And for this judge to say, oh, shame on you for claiming that there's election fraud, screw her. She should not be a judge. If she's that biased that she doesn't even think that the accusation should be able to be made, she should not have that job. She's not wise enough to have that position, because everyone has a right to make. Look, if people are lying, if people genuinely don't believe there was election fraud and they're claiming that there's election fraud for some kind of political reason, which what they're claiming Trump is doing, which I don't believe for a second, that would actually be a bad thing to do. I think that would be shameful. But her assumption that people don't really believe it, that we're all just making this up for some kind of... I can't tell you how many people I know who genuinely believe there was election fraud, right? Sebastian Gorka, Dinesh D'Souza, pretty much every big conservative name in the media, even Tucker Carlson, you watch his show, he talks about it. Almost every single major conservative out there in the media believes there was election fraud. I think the only one who doesn't is Ben Shapiro. But everybody else pretty much is like, yeah, it looks like there was probably election fraud. But it hasn't been able to sort of, there's no videotape of Nancy Pelosi scheming. So, we don't have that bloody knife. All right, why don't we, okay, I'm done with my rant. So okay. I'm going to answer the riddle for you. Okay, at the top of the show, a lot of you guys missed this, but at the top of the show, I asked a riddle. It was a riddle I made up, so it might not be a very good riddle. But here's the riddle. I live in an apartment on the 100th floor. No one lives above me. Nobody lives on either side. Nobody lives below me. How is this possible? Valeria, have you had time to think about this riddle?
I was just thinking about one thing. Is Trump in his tower. That's
Trump in his tower? Yeah, it's nothing too clever. It's a very simple riddle. It's probably many answers. Does anybody have an answer in the comments?
Well, I was paying attention to, I was reading some comments, but...
Right. Okay, so the answer to this riddle is simple. The answer to this riddle is, I'm lying. That's the answer to the riddle, right? The person who makes the claim is lying. It's a ridiculous notion. It's a ridiculous thing to say. And, okay, and look, this riddle could be manufactured in probably way better ways than what I came up with. I just came up with something quickly that sounded a bit ridiculous. But there's a lot of silly things, a lot of impossible things, a lot of absurd things that are mentioned in the media these days. And it's often hard to get your head into this position where you're thinking, oh, this person's lying, right? I mean, for most conservatives, for most people who watch my show, people who support Trump, that sort of thing, it's very easy to get your head around that idea. But the problem is that's not where our head goes normally. We have a tendency to trust people when they tell us something. Because why lie, right? Most of the time, 99% of the time in the world, you don't really have a reason to lie. And so, or when you're an adult, when you're a child, I think kids lie a lot. But when you get to be an adult, there's not a huge amount of reason to lie to people. There's a lot more reason not to, right? Because if you get caught in a lie, people lose respect for you. So you learn, after you're a child, you learn that it's best not to lie unless you really, really have to. Right? Unless you're in a dire situation, like you've murdered somebody. Okay? Then I expect people are probably going to lie. That's probably the most sensible path. So criminals have a good reason to lie. But the rest of us, most people don't lie. And because we don't lie, we accept what people have to say. And this is the problem with Democrat voters. The media is lying to them, and they're not skeptical enough. They're not thinking enough about the lie. Anyway, that's just an idea that I had earlier today. You guys may think it's stupid. I don't know. It's just a thought that I had earlier. Okay, so without further ado, let us get to the first news story. Valeria?
Okay. Can I read it my way?
You can read it however you want, Tom.
Okay. The Biden's assistant secretary of health advocates for child sex changes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is, I think you guys all know who this is. This is, Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.